Hey, what's up? Jeff Lerner here, and today we're going to be taking a look at what school doesn't want you to know, what you didn't learn in school, what your kids aren't learning in school, what the principals and the teachers and the guidance counselors don't want you to know. And the whole system has a stake in you thinking certain things are possible for your life, when in fact, there are dramatically different things possible for your life. Okay, so come with me. Let's head into the office here, hop onto my computer, and I'm going to show you some cool stuff. We'll just walk on over here to my workstation right there where the magic happens. All right, we're gonna look at what school didn't teach you and why they didn't teach you. Let's dive right in. So first of all, a little bit of context about why I'm talking about education. At this point, if you're watching this video, you probably know who I am. My name is Jeff Lerner. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm married, I have 4 kids, I live in Southern Utah, and I wanna talk a little bit about my background with education so you kind of have some context and understand, where I'm coming from with this conversation. I actually dropped out of high school. I was a jazz musician, dropped out of high school my junior year. I was 17 years old. I just wanted to play piano. So dropped out. I did end up actually wanting to go to college because I wanted to study with some better, music educators that I had to get access to through the college. So I actually got my GED, went to college. I spent 10 years finishing college. I was working full-time as a musician the whole time. Didn't graduate till I was 27 years old. And around that time, I realized that I was never going to really make much money as a jazz musician. And frankly, I wanted a bigger, better life. I had this sense that life is, like I still say to this day, life is meant to be awesome. And I was probably working 70, 80 hours a week as a musician between playing and teaching, and never made more than $40,000 a year. It just wasn't what I wanted out of life. So at 28 years old, I started internet marketing, which primarily was affiliate marketing, e-commerce, and consulting. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll explain a little bit more about that. In my first 10 years online, I did over $30 million in revenue. So obviously, and that's businesses that I own. I operate on the internet. It wasn't like, a company doing $30 million in revenue. It was like a guy with a couple assistants maybe. So obviously just incredible transformation in my quality of life. I also started real estate investing in my early 30s. And now I still run my online businesses. I get to speak. I've written a couple books. They're not large books. I find if you write a large book in this day and age, nobody actually reads it. But the Entre Blueprint and Hacker's Guide to an Awesome Life, it kind of spell out exactly how I think you can attack this world and go make a great life for yourself. I am the CEO and founder of an Inc. 5000 digital agency. So clearly I've had a lot of really great blessings and things that have gone my way. I've worked really hard. But the reason I share all this with you is because I was a high school dropout. Everything that I've built with stuff that I've taught myself. I can honestly say, although I'm grateful for the education that I received, I'm more grateful for the value of education that I was taught by my parents, who really instilled in me the idea that I could teach myself anything. I often joke that I can't help it. I was born a learner. I was given the name. But that's the real education that I'm grateful for, was being taught the idea that I can teach myself anything I want. And that's really a big part of what I want to share with you guys watching this video. Real quick, I want to give some examples of what does this actually look like when I talk about, doing business online, being self-taught, creating, online income streams, using knowledge that, really isn't available in schools. Let me give you just kind of some quick examples. So I'll drag over here. This is a little e-com business that I run. It's really a kind of a minor thing. It's a very niche thing. You can see over here, it pays me, anywhere from $100 to, $500 or $600 a day. What's awesome about this business is, it basically took me a couple weeks to get it set up. And at this point, I literally probably check on it about once every 2 or 3 months, usually when we need to order some more product, which involves sending one email to a guy in California. And between $200 and $600 a day for sending one email every 2 or 3 months is basically what that business requires now. This is another income stream that I have. This is actually an affiliate marketing income stream. I actually have 3 accounts with these guys. This is one of them. And this is less than a year. I set this up, I think last fall sometime, maybe September. And so it's paid almost $60,000 in less than a year. This, again, I check on this about once a month. And when I say check on it, I mean, I just log in and look at the number and go, okay, cool. It's usually about $5,000 a month. No effort required. Once it's set up, it just runs itself. This is another income stream, just sort of an ancillary income stream. I'm starting with some of the small stuff. This is a product I promote, and you can see $5, $10, $15 multiple times a day. This adds up to maybe $1,000, $2,000 a month, pretty consistently. Again, no effort required. Honestly, until I was getting ready for this video, I don't think I'd even logged into that in probably 6 months. Another business that I have, this one's a little more substantial, and I'll actually show you exactly what this is. So basically, this is an affiliate product that I did take the time to negotiate what's called a white label. So basically, I was able to take somebody else's product and put my own brand on it. And it's a software product that essentially I sell, but I didn't have to create and I don't have to support. And this is... I'm not actually at liberty to show what the business is doing right now because I have an operating agreement that says I won't show current revenue numbers. But this is that business from 2017 and 2018. You can see 220co.infusionsoft.com. This is our billing system for 2017 and 2018. Did about $5.3 million in subscription revenue. So that's money coming in month after month that I don't have to re-earn every month. $5.3 million over the course of 2 years, obviously pretty cool. And then here's another business, different business. You can see same billing system, but a different domain. And same time frame, again, same deal. Can't show you what it's doing right now this year, but I can say for 2017, 2018, did almost $12 million in this business. Just home-based. I say home-based. I mean, I'm working in my office, and I think this camera will allow you to see my office. I mean, I'm turning the screen. This is my office. It's just me. There's nobody else here. It's 1,000 square feet. I got my piano. I got a conference table if I want to have a meeting with a few people. But it doesn't require an army of people. This isn't like a traditional business where you have to have a big office and a big company to do this kind of stuff. So obviously, incredible quality of life that comes from this. And again, nothing I learned how to do in school. Let's bring this conversation back to education. How did we get in this situation where there's these skills out there that, a high school dropout jazz musician can do to create all this stuff and nobody's teaching our kids about it. So this is, I consider myself, people say, what do you do? What I do changes over the course of the years. At one point, I was just trying to not be broke as a musician. But now what I do is I consider myself in the re-education business. It's not just about more education. I have to re-educate. The term education comes from the Latin word ducare, to lead. And people have already been led. They've already been educated. They've already been led in a certain direction. So a lot of what I do is I have to backtrack people from a belief system and a possibility standpoint and say, look, there's a whole other set of possibilities out there. Let's go down this path and let me lead the way. So how did we get in this situation where education is so limiting for people? Well, I'm fascinated by this. I really wanted to know, why is it that the whole time I was a kid going to school, I had this uneasy sense that I wasn't getting the whole story? So here's a little bit of the history of education in the United States, but it sort of parallels around the world because most modern education around the world is actually sort of extracted from what the United States has done over the last 200 years. So talking about the origins of, it's really the U.S., and then you have, Far East has this kind of its own educational model, and then you have what's called the Prussian model, which we'll talk a little bit about, which is kind of the European education model that influenced and vice versa the U.S. education model. So anyway, here's the origin story. Prior to 1830, all schooling was private. It was done by local communities. It was done by churches. It was done, at home by families or in small groups, neighborhood, sort of locally organized groups. There was no such thing as public school. And then between 1820 and 1850, there was what was generally perceived at the time as a problem. And I put problem in quotes because it's probably not politically correct to define immigration as a problem now. But at the time, the fact that there were over 1 million Irish Catholic immigrants that had come into the United States was considered a major problem. The way it was presented at the time is because they were Catholic. I think there was a prejudice against the Irish, but it was very folded up in a religious convention at the time. There was concern that there were all these Catholics coming into the country, right? So the way this problem kind of got dealt with, and that's, again, you have to be careful in the 21st century talking about this stuff. This is how it was back then in a country that was, essentially the order at the time was established by Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, male-dominated society, right? Like we all know the history of the U.S. So this guy, Horace Mann, who was a state, I think he was a state senator, state legislator in Massachusetts, and he ended up going to the U.S. Congress. In 1837, 1838, he started pushing really hard for the establishment of a public school system. And he's generally known as like the father of modern education. And Horace Mann was a Protestant, he was a Christian, but he also recognized that you were going to create a lot of constitutional problems trying to say, look, we need to establish a Protestant, we need to maintain our Protestantism in this country because we've got all these Catholics coming in that aren't loyal. And the prejudice at the time, or the bias, was they're not loyal to the U.S., they're loyal to the Pope in Rome, right? So, I mean, this stuff all sounds absurd now, but so he kind of, I would argue somewhat cleverly, although I suspect his intentions were, like all human intentions, a mix of good and bad. But he sort of cleverly said, well, we're not going to fight against Catholicism. What we're going to do is we're just going to establish what we'll call a non-denominational order within schools. We'll make schools free, we'll make them public, we'll make them controlled by the government, and we'll make them centered around Christian values. That was his term at the time. Because, theoretically nobody can argue with that. And so what you really get is the foundational history of the U.S. public schools. It's not really about poor, getting educational opportunities to the poor or to the rural versus people who lived in cities, or to people who were inland versus people who were closer to the urban centers on the East Coast at the time. Like, that's all the stories that get told. The real foundational history of the U.S. public schools is about Protestantism versus Catholicism. So this guy Horace Mann and his kind of crew establish what they called non-denominational public schools. But the fact is, they used the King James Bible. They literally taught right out of the King James Bible. They sang Protestant hymns every morning. They said Protestant prayers. It was a very Protestant-dominated school system. And so in 1874, the Catholics were like, okay, this is really not fair. Supposedly we're getting non-religious education, but our kids are being sort of shoved this direction. So they founded what they called the parochial school system that was in response to the Protestant domination of U.S. schools. And that actually became the origin of what ended up becoming like the private school system, which isn't really a system. It's more of a reaction to the public school system. But the Catholic parochial system was kind of the first private school, the genesis of private schools in this country. And so the thing is, this isn't a religious problem. Like, we live in a world now where we're kind of past and I know there's people that argue about this, but we're kind of past like it really being a big problem of like religious indoctrination in the schools, right? I mean, if nothing else, the internet has cured that, because just information is so freely accessible now to people of all ages. But it's still a centralization of power problem, I would argue. And what really happened is the way the schools evolved, they were able to sidestep the separation of church and state. And so now, even though the problem isn't that everyone goes to school and they end up getting shoved into the same church, there's still a problem of everyone goes to school and they end up getting taught a limited set of views, shoved into a similar mindset, and essentially molded into a model where there's this idea of, a rightness and a wrongness that's predicated on a sameness versus a difference. And that, you may be like, Jeff, what are you talking about? What I'm saying is, in the modern school system, you are better the more you are the same in terms of what they teach and how they teach. And that's maybe a nebulous way of explaining it, but the fact is, if you've been through public school, you know what I'm talking about. This is why I literally dropped out. I couldn't take it. I couldn't take every day being told, Jeff, there is an arbitrarily conceived standard. It's not moral. It's not theological. It's arbitrary, and or it's informed by the needs of business. It's informed by the needs of society and culture and, the powers that be, which, again, it's one of those things that, like, it's hard to describe, but you definitely know it's there. And they need everyone to be kind of a certain way. And that's really an anti-American idea. But in the particular case of the schools, because the church-state separation was sidestepped and it was packaged as being about accessibility to the poor or accessibility to the rural, we've all kind of bought into this idea that it's okay to try to make everyone the same. And the reality is, we're limiting people. That's my fundamental problem with it. And you can see this if you read this quote by Henry Bernard, who was, Horace Mann was operating in Massachusetts, Henry Bernard was operating in Connecticut, and ultimately they sort of stand as the twin towers of the creation of the American educational system. Listen to what he said in 1838, at the same time that Horace Mann was passing laws in Massachusetts, Henry Bernard was doing this in Connecticut. He said, "No one at all familiar with the deficient household arrangements and deranged machinery of domestic life, of the extreme poor and ignorant and the intemperate," which, what does intemperate mean? It basically means people that he doesn't like, or he thinks they're unruly, or they have a bad temper, right? Or bad manners, which he defines as saying rude manners, people who use profane language, and all the vicious habits of low-bred idleness. So essentially, no one who understands how terrible it is, in the households of the poor and uneducated people could disagree that it is better for children to be removed as early and as long as possible from such scenes and examples. In other words, you poor, slovenly heathens, give us your children so that we can protect them from you, and so that we, the state, the government, can keep you from screwing them up and raising them to not be what we need them to be because we know better than you. And he says it, plain as day. That's from a speech that he gave establishing public education. So, that's kind of creepy, right? So what happened was we ended up evolving, and we basically took our cues from the European educational system, what's known as the Prussian model, I mentioned this earlier, or the factory education model, where basically once once the American government got people to buy into this concept of public education as a state institution and as essentially a due right of citizenship, or not even citizenship, just because you're here, the government should take care of your kids. Our schools became, for lack of a better term, a factory for producing people that were equipped to work in factories. This was all congruent in time with the industrial era, the Industrial Revolution. And so, mid 19th century and early 20th century, we needed people that would make furniture, that would stock warehouses, that would, ultimately assemble automobiles, and that would do, what was essentially, metalworking and work on docks and things that were, sort of repetitive, at least mind-numbing, if not outright substandard working condition type of stuff. And the schools essentially became, a production mechanism for creating the right mindset that was docile, that was submissive, and that I think most importantly was not informed about the alternatives. Because one of the things I wrestle with a lot is, like, why aren't they teaching kids at least that they have a choice? That there's this other world out there of entrepreneurship, of starting a business, of being your own boss, of being the master of your own destiny. Why aren't they at least giving people the option or telling them that it exists, even if they're discouraging them from taking it or saying, oh, but you got to, play it safe, get a job. They don't even say that. They just don't tell them. They act like it doesn't exist. And it's because they need people to generally accept that whatever they're doing is their only option. Because the reality is most work conditions are pretty crappy. Most jobs are pretty crappy because, at the very least, they involve trading the vast majority of your waking time for what most of us would agree is, an undervaluation of the value of our time. And so in order to accept that, and not only to accept it for a day, but to accept it for a decade or accept it for 40, 50 years of working life, the most effective way to get people to accept something is to deny them the knowledge that they even have a choice, right? That explains a lot. And so for the next 150 years, look, Jeff Lerner on the internet's not the first person to go, hey, this is kind of a messed up system. And a lot of people have said this is kind of a messed up system. If you Google educational reform, I mean, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of books on Amazon written by very, very smart people that are taking major issue with exactly all the same stuff that I'm talking about. But from the time that it was conceived all the way through to the present, every attempt to really disrupt the U.S. education system is always met with sort of one of three responses. There's either a cultural argument that basically says, well, the U.S. has gotten so diverse, and you have economic disparities, and you have language disparities, and you have cultural disparities, that if we don't have sort of a standardized educational platform, you're going to end up with too many different pockets of too many different types of people, and nobody will really be able to collaborate or work together. So that's kind of the cultural argument. Then you have the economic argument, which basically says, okay, look, we've created this massive economic system around student loans and people going to college and these big corporations that require people graduating with a very standardized set of education or set of skills. And so high schools have to feed the colleges, and colleges have to feed the corporations, and there's too much economically riding on that status quo, so we can't afford to disrupt it. That's the second argument. And then you get the people who basically go, yeah, that is pretty messed up, but there's nothing we can do about it because it's big and monolithic and we can't change it. And that's what I call the inertia-based non-argument, just that there's nothing we can do, right? And that's it. Those are really the only responses you get. There's been no really, really significant educational reform since this was established. And so, I'm very much of the opinion that who am I, right? I'm not a politician, and I have no desire to be a politician. I'm not going to change the system from within the system. So what I've done is I've said, okay, well, let me go learn as much as I can about what else is out there that they're not teaching in schools. And instead of just talking about it and being, the crazy voice in the wilderness that nobody listens to, I'll actually go prove it. I'll do it. I'll get results with it first. And then people will go, oh yeah, look, he figured it out, or he's actually making it work. Maybe I should listen to him. So all that to say, look, here's 10 things. Here's 10 things that you will never hear about in a school, that your kids are not going to hear about in school, that you could go do right now today if you had knowledge and make $500 an hour. And I share this, and it's like, there are people in this world grinding away year after year, decade after decade for $12 an hour, $15 an hour, $18 an hour, $7.25 an hour, sadly, in some places, thinking that there's nothing else out there. Here are 10 things you could do right now today to make $500 an hour or more. In fact, these are 10 things that all of which I have done and could do at any time that I chose. And I know for a fact, because I have done it before and I could do it again, make $500 plus per hour. Affiliate marketing, I showed you an affiliate marketing business, one of them, that generated $5.2 million for me in 2 years. E-commerce, I showed you my e-com store that, again, involves sending one email every 2 or 3 months and pays, probably $5,000 a month. Consulting, my best day of consulting, I can tell you I was paid $25,000 to go into a company and do 1 day of consulting on their sales operations. Real estate investing obviously speaks for itself. There's a zillion courses out there. I do some of it myself. I have about 30 doors. Coaching, public speaking, information marketing, digital product creation. I showed you a $12 million income stream in 2 years that's all based around digital products that I created. Sales, obviously, I do sales every day. Direct response marketing, do it every day. This is all stuff that most people, other than maybe real estate investing, and I guess public speaking, people kind of think they know what that entails. People don't really even know what a lot of this stuff means. And yet we talk about, okay, well, tell me the history of the Peloponnesian War, or tell me who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey, and tell me about how to factor a polynomial, or contextual rules for proper use of commas and proper use of apostrophes. And that stuff's all cool too. Frankly, I think that stuff's really cool because it's at the heart of logical thinking. It's at the heart of effective communication. And it's at the heart of, there's some big lessons in knowing your history, because those who do not know their history are destined to repeat it. But that's all to inform what we can do right now to create value in the world. The problem in the educational system is it's not what is taught, it's the context of what is taught. The students are not taught, they're not given context, they're not given, models by which they could actually apply these skills or this knowledge that they're getting and actually use it to go out and make an impact in the world. And this is, I don't have to have a degree in child psychology or education or any of that to know this is true. I have children, and my children have friends, and I talk to them all the time. And literally to a person, they don't get school. School is doing a horrible job of contextualizing and vision casting for them how any of this plays into their future, other than just sit down, be quiet, do what you're told, trust us. And that's bad education, if you ask me. And here's what it comes down to: the fundamental divide of anyone versus everyone. Schools, again, I don't have a problem with what school is. I just wish it would be honest about what it is. School is the catch-all plan B for everyone else. But there is a whole other world of skills, opportunities, and knowledge out there that allows for anyone to be able to do different and I would argue more extraordinary, wonderful things with their life. And then for everyone else, there's what school teaches. And I say this all the time: anyone can, but not everyone will. The stuff that I teach, let's go back to those 10 things. Anyone can do at least one, if not several of these things. I get that not everyone in the world is meant to be a public speaker. Not everyone in the world is meant to be a coach. Not everyone in the world is meant to be in sales. But there's something on this list that can pay $500 an hour that anyone in the world can do. My wife and I, we watch this show called My 600-Pound Life. These people are homebound. They can't even get out of bed. But you know what they could do? They could run an e-com store on a laptop. They literally could do that. There's this one lady, they wheel up a table with a fry cooker, and she cooks her own wings at her bed and eats the wings. If she can do that, she could run an e-com store on a laptop. She could build a list and do affiliate marketing on a laptop. She could do information marketing. She could do direct response marketing, consulting, and sell services. She could do these things from a laptop, even bedridden. And yet, most people won't do it. That's the difference. Anyone can, not everyone will. And my problem with school is that the stuff that anyone could do, school just leaves it out. It just starts with what everyone else will do, especially if it's the only thing they're ever shown. So all that to say, that's why I've created Entre Institute, the Entre movement. You saw that, earlier I wrote a book called the Entre Blueprint, a total life excellence plan for achieving personal, professional, and physical mastery while creating an online cash flow business. I've put together a course called 6 Steps to Freedom. These are the top 3 business models online that people are using to generate $500 plus per hour, and a method for knowing which one will work the best for you. Now, as you saw, I quickly made a list of 10 different things that someone could do. And there's a lot more than 10. I just literally put 10 on the slide because that's all the room there was on the slide. But this course hones in on 3 of them and helps you figure out which of the 3 is a good starting point. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to give the unfortunately necessary disclaimer. Look, here's the reality. Not everyone makes $500 per hour. Some people could do this stuff and make no money. In fact, some people do. Some people have bought my courses, gone through my training, and made no money. Some people will access the training and take no action. That happens. Others access the training, and then they even do their best, whatever that is, and they still don't get results that they're happy with, which isn't that different than having a job, right? Some people get a job, they do their best, and they still get fired for reasons that they may perceive to be beyond their control, and they especially might complain about wasn't their fault. Life isn't fair. Starting a business is even less fair than life. The law requires disclaimers like this, but honestly, if you haven't figured out yet that there are no guarantees in life, then no law is going to keep you safe. But that said, if you're ready to bet on yourself, take responsibility for your own education, check out my stuff. Check out my website, all right? Entre Institute is my best attempt to show what anyone can do, knowing full well that not everyone will. For everyone else, great. That's what school is for. You got what you needed when you went to school. But for those of you who know that there is something exceptional out there and that there are these tools that can allow you to live a life less ordinary, 6 Steps to Freedom could be the right step for you in that direction. These are the top 3 business models online that people are using to generate $500 per hour, and a method for knowing which one is likely to work the best for you. All right, hopefully you got tremendous value out of that video. I appreciate you watching it. I love doing them for you. If you'd like to get more videos about entrepreneurship, digital marketing, basically how to have a ridiculously awesome life using the tools that are available to anyone now who will just become informed and motivated to learn how to do it, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you're on YouTube, click subscribe and make sure you click the little bell icon so you get notifications of new videos. If you're watching this on Facebook, make sure you like my page so you get those notifications and new videos. This is Jeff Lerner signing off. Remember that life is meant to be awesome. It's meant to be awesome, but you got to do the work, and the tools are out there. See you on the next one.